Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're going into some pretty murky waters. We're talking about harmful groups and cults.
Woo!
And, it's a topic that I think fascinates a lot of people.
Yeah.
And you guys sent in a ton of stuff for this one, articles, social media posts, even some personal letters. And it all revolves around this group called the Science of Identity Foundation, or SIF.
Yeah.
Have you had much experience with this group?
I've come across it a few times, doing this kind of work, but it's definitely a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating. And especially around the founder, Chris Butler,
Oh,
or as he also likes to call himself, Siddhisvarapananda Paramahamsa.
Okay, so we are already starting off with a mouthful.
Right.
Can you maybe give us like the quick backstory here?
Sure. So SF, their roots go back to the 1970s.
Okay.
In Hawaii. And Butler was actually part of the Hare Krishna movement originally.
Interesting.
Yeah. He even became a guru under the name Sai Young.
So he was already in a pretty intense spiritual environment.
Very much so. And eventually joined ISKCON, another branch of the Hare Krishna movement.
Yeah.
And that's actually where he got that name, Siddhisvarapananda Paramahamsa.
Okay.
But Butler had a little bit of a rebellious streak. He ended up getting married, which is kind of unusual for gurus at the time.
Right.
And allowed his disciples to keep their heads unshaved, kind of breaking from tradition.
So already a bit of a maverick.
Yeah.
And this all led to him founding SIF.
Exactly.
Good.
So in 1977, after the leader of ISKCON passed away, Butler broke away and formed his own organization.
Gotcha.
It was originally called the Harinama Society,
Okay.
blending yoga with aspects of Gaudiya Vaishnava theology,
Okay.
the tradition behind the Hare Krishna movement.
Yeah.
And they promoted vegetarianism.
Sure.
No gambling, smoking, alcohol, drugs, or what they called illicit sex.
Pretty strict guidelines.
Yeah, pretty strict.
What were some of the concerns about SIF when it first kind of popped up?
Well, some former members started calling it a cult, saying that Butler had this almost godlike status and discouraged any kind of dissent.
Okay. That sets off alarm bells for me right away.
Yeah.
Were there any like civic examples of this kind of control?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, for example, Suf allegedly discouraged any kind of interaction with other Vaishnava groups.
Okay.
So creating kind of an us versus them mentality
Yeah.
and making the members very dependent on Suf for information and validation.
It's like building a wall around people's minds.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then there were the teachings themselves. Ex-members described Butler using fear and guilt to manipulate followers.
Right.
Like telling them to fear that Krishna wouldn't love them because of their sins.
Oh, wow.
So preying on those very human anxieties we all have.
Totally. And speaking of that, we had that personal letter from the former member, Krishna Das.
Yes.
Right? What did that reveal?
Yeah, his letter, which he also signed Mahabhava Das,
Okay.
really details his growing discomfort with Seth.
Yeah.
And he specifically calls out the restrictions on associating with other Vaishnava groups, saying it fostered this sectarian atmosphere.
Ah, so it confirms that sense of isolation
Yes.
and control.
And this is where I think it's helpful to understand a bit about the psychology behind these tactics.
Yeah.
One of the concepts psychologists use is cognitive dissonance.
Right.
And it's that mental discomfort we feel when our beliefs clash with our actions or new information.
Yeah.
And groups like SIF might exploit this by creating an environment where questioning the leader or the doctrine
Right.
causes such intense dissonance that it's easier to just shut down critical thinking altogether.
So they're manipulating not just people's emotions, but their very thought processes.
Exactly.
Wow, that's scary.
And this brings us to another key concept, the BITE model.
Okay.
It stands for Behavior, Information, Thought, and Emotional Control.
Okay.
And it's a framework for understanding the methods that cults and harmful groups use to exert influence. And we can see elements of all four types of control in what we're learning about Seth.
Wow, that's helpful. So it's not just about one charismatic leader or a few strange rules.
Right.
It's a systematic approach to control.
You got it.
Now, looking at SIF specifically based on the source material that we have,
Yeah.
what are some of the red flags that are jumping out at you? What should our listener be paying close attention to?
Yeah. What about you? What are you seeing?
Well, that control of information is a big one.
Right.
Imagine a group that's like a Venus flytrap.
Okay.
It lures you in with promises of sweetness,
Yeah.
but then its tendrils slowly close around you and restrict your freedom.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah,
It highlights that deceptive element,
Yeah.
the way harmful groups can seem so appealing at first,
totally.
offering belonging and certainty.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
another red flag that is screaming at me is this idea of the leader being beyond reproach.
Yeah.
That kind of unquestioning obedience is a recipe for abuse of power. It's like giving someone a blank check with your life.
You're spot on. And speaking of finances,
Yeah.
the sources suggest there might be some financial exploitation happening as well.
Okay.
There were claims that SIF pushed members to prioritize work for the group
Okay.
above their own personal and professional development.
Okay, that's crossing a major boundary.
Yeah.
Now it's not just about beliefs anymore.
Right.
It's affecting people's livelihoods and well-being.
And there are allegations that this work was often unpaid,
Oh, wow.
tied to the promise of initiation,
Okay.
and that some members dedicated years of their lives without any guarantee of actually being initiated.
It's like they're dangling this carrot of spiritual advancement
Yeah.
and keeping people hooked on this promise that may never materialize.
And what's more, the sources also mention financial penalties imposed on members.
That's alarming. So it really paints a picture of a system where members are under constant pressure to conform and contribute, both financially and in terms of their labor.
This financial aspect, coupled with the other red flags we've discussed, starts to paint a very troubling picture.
It's heartbreaking to think about people getting caught up in these kinds of situations.
Yeah.
They're often searching for something positive, a way to make a difference, and end up being taken advantage of.
Yeah. And that's why it's so important to talk about these issues openly and honestly.
Yeah.
The more we understand the tactics used by harmful groups, the more we can empower ourselves and others to protect ourselves.
Absolutely. Now, there was another disturbing allegation that really caught my attention.
Okay.
This idea that SIF might have been protecting individuals within the group who were accused of crimes.
Yes, that's a serious allegation.
Yeah.
And while the sources don't go into detail, it raises huge questions about the organization's ethical compass and its commitment to justice.
Yeah.
This type of behavior can foster a dangerous environment where accountability is disregarded.
And it creates a chilling effect, where victims might be afraid to speak out or seek help.
You're absolutely right. It suggests a power structure where certain individuals are above the law and where the group's interests are prioritized over the safety and well-being of its members or those outside the group.
It's a stark reminder that any organization, regardless of its spiritual or philosophical claims, can become corrupted when power goes unchecked and ethical boundaries are blurred.
Well said. And I think this is a good place to pause and delve a bit deeper into Chris Butler himself.
Yeah.
What do the sources tell us about his character, his teachings, and what might have drawn people to him? So from what we've gathered, Butler seems like a very complicated figure, He was mixing this traditional yoga with his own take on Gaudiya Vaishnava theology.
So offering like a unique spin on already pretty esoteric concepts.
Right.
That could be appealing to people who are seeking something different.
Yeah.
Maybe disillusioned with mainstream religions.
Absolutely. Plus, he really cultivated this image of being a true authority.
Yeah.
Someone with deep spiritual insights.
Yeah, and that kind of authority can be very attractive.
Right.
Especially when you're searching for guidance.
Right.
But, as we're seeing, it can also be easily misused.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And there are these concerns about Butler using his teachings to manipulate and control his followers.
Right.
For example, ex-members allege that he would publicly mock devotees.
Oh, wow.
Claiming it was somehow Krishna's mercy.
That's so bizarre.
Yeah.
What kind of spiritual leader uses humiliation as a teaching tool?
It's definitely a red flag.
Yeah.
And, this is just one of the contradictions we see with Butler.
Yeah.
On the one hand, he's this, spiritual leader offering enlightenment.
Right.
But on the other hand, there are these allegations of manipulation, control, and even abuse.
It's almost like he was playing a role.
Yeah.
Like presenting this carefully crafted persona.
That's certainly a possibility. And it reminds us that we can never truly know what happens behind closed doors.
Right.
Especially when someone holds a position of power.
Absolutely.
We have to be extra careful and evaluate information critically, particularly when it comes to spiritual leaders or groups making really bold claims.
Okay, so let's dig into those claims a bit more.
Okay.
What are some of the specific red flags in Butler's teachings
Yeah.
that you picked up from the sources?
Well, beyond just kind of SIF's basic guidelines,
Right.
there are some recurring themes that are really worrisome.
Okay.
For starters, his condemnation of homosexuality is a major issue.
Yeah.
He also expressed hostility towards Islam,
Right.
which again is obviously very problematic.
Promoting division and intolerance?
Yeah.
Which is the opposite of what most spiritual traditions advocate for.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And perhaps most alarmingly, Butler's teachings displayed a skepticism of science.
Ooh, okay.
Going so far as to discourage followers from seeking medical treatment or psychological help.
That is so dangerous.
It is incredibly dangerous.
Denying science and promoting faith-based healing exclusively can have dire consequences.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's another way a group like SIF might try to isolate members
Right.
and control their access to information and care.
So this pattern is getting clearer and clearer.
Yes.
But I'm still curious about who joined SIF.
Right.
Who were these people and what might have drawn them in?
It's a really complex question, and there's no easy answer.
Yeah.
However, several themes do emerge from the sources.
Okay.
Many were young
Okay.
and idealistic,
Right.
searching for meaning and purpose.
Sure.
And SIF offered this sense of community and belonging,
Yeah.
which can be very powerful, especially during those formative years.
So not necessarily naive or gullible,
Right.
but genuinely seeking something positive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember that harmful groups often target individuals during these vulnerable periods.
Yeah.
Maybe they're dealing with a personal loss,
Right.
a career change, or even a spiritual crisis. And in those moments of uncertainty,
Yeah.
a group promising belonging and purpose can be incredibly appealing.
They're offering a solution,
Yeah,
a sense of security at a
Yes.
time when people are feeling the most vulnerable.
exactly. And once someone is drawn in, the dynamics of control and manipulation
Right.
make it very difficult to leave. Fear of consequences, a sense of having nowhere else to go.
Yeah.
These are powerful forces.
And the group might weaponize guilt and shame
Right.
to prevent people from speaking out or seeking help.
It's a complex and insidious web.
Yeah.
Far more intricate than just individual choices.
Right.
We have to understand these group dynamics and how they exploit vulnerabilities
Yeah.
to maintain control.
That's such a crucial point.
Oh.
Okay, so let's go back to that letter from Krishna Karunya Das.
Okay.
What specifically pushed him to leave SIF?
So his letter is this really raw and honest account of his inner struggles.
Yeah.
He describes feeling increasingly uneasy about SIF's teachings and practices, particularly the restrictions on connecting with other Vaishnava communities.
Okay.
He felt that it created this sectarian mindset
Right.
that convinced disciples that Butler was the only true guru.
So they were essentially building walls around themselves,
Right.
cutting themselves off from the wider spiritual world.
Exactly. Krishna Karunya thus craved the teachings of other respected Vaishnava gurus,
Yeah.
believing he could learn and grow from their wisdom.
Sure.
But within SIF, there was this fear,
Right.
this discouragement of exploring other paths.
It sounds like they were actively stifling his spiritual growth,
Yeah.
forcing him into this very narrow box.
And it gets worse.
Okay.
He even describes having to secretly attend gatherings of other Vaishnava groups,
Wow.
terrified of what would happen if his involvement was discovered.
So living a double life
Yeah.
just to explore his faith, that's incredibly sad.
It's a classic sign of a controlling environment.
Yeah.
You know, healthy spiritual communities encourage open dialogue, critical thinking, and respect for diverse viewpoints.
Yeah.
They don't isolate their members or limit their exposure to different ideas.
True spiritual growth requires an open mind
Right.
and a willingness to explore,
Yeah.
not blind obedience to one person or doctrine.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And for Krishna Karunya, it reached a breaking point.
Yeah.
He realized he couldn't stay in an environment that restricted him so severely,
Right.
where his genuine desire for spiritual exploration was met with fear and condemnation.
So what happened? How did he finally break free?
So he was actually excommunicated from SIF.
Oh, wow.
It came out that he had received initiation from another guru, Srila Narayan Maharaj.
So they punished him
Right.
for seeking guidance elsewhere.
It clearly shows the level of control SIF was trying to maintain.
Yeah.
Any questioning of Butler's authority, any exploration of alternative paths was seen as a threat.
It's like they viewed any outside influence as a virus.
Yeah.
Something to be eradicated.
It's a powerful reminder that harmful groups often rely on isolation and fear
Right.
to keep members in line,
Yeah.
control the narrative, limit access to information,
Yeah.
and discourage independent thinking. That's the playbook.
So in a way, his excommunication was a form of liberation,
Right.
freeing him from a system that was trying to control his mind and spirit.
That's a very profound way to look at it.
Yeah.
His story is a testament to the power of following your own inner compass.
Yeah.
Even when it means facing difficult consequences or going against the grain.
It's incredibly inspiring. Now, you mentioned thought reform earlier,
Yes.
sometimes called brainwashing.
Right.
Is there any evidence that Sif might have been using those kinds of techniques?
Well, we have to be careful with terms like brainwashing.
Of course.
It's very complex and often misunderstood.
Yeah.
However, the sources do point to methods employed by Sif
Okay.
that could be seen as forms of thought reform.
Can you give us some examples? What kind of methods are we talking about?
So one common tactic is creating an information vacuum where members are only exposed to the group's approved teachings
Yeah.
and their interpretation of reality.
Yeah.
We see this in Sif's discouragement of association with other Vaishnava groups.
So they're controlling the narrative,
Right.
shaping how members perceive the
Yeah.
world.
Exactly.
Just like we were discussing earlier.
Another tactic is using guilt and shame
Right.
to shut down critical thinking or dissent.
Yeah.
And the allegations of Butler publicly mocking devotees fit this pattern.
Yeah.
You know, if you question the teachings or
Yeah.
the leader,
Yeah.
you're made to feel bad
Right.
or wrong.
It's classic manipulation.
Yeah,
And it can be incredibly effective at maintaining control and silencing any dissent.
it's like they're creating this mental fortress
Yeah.
and reinforcing it with layers of psychological manipulation.
And it's important to remember that these dynamics aren't limited to religious groups.
Right.
You know, they can be found in political organizations,
Yes,
self-help groups, even business settings.
absolutely.
So these red flags,
Right.
these manipulative tactics
Yeah,
are universal.
they are.
They apply wherever there's an imbalance of power and one person or group is trying to exert undue influence over others.
Exactly. That's why it's so crucial to be aware of these warning signs.
Yeah.
And to trust your gut instincts if something feels off about a group or its leader.
Okay, so let's shift gears for a moment and talk about the bigger picture.
Okay.
What are the lasting consequences of being involved in a harmful group,
Right.
both for individuals and for society as a whole?
Well, the impact can be truly devastating and far-reaching.
Yeah.
Individuals often experience psychological and emotional trauma,
Yeah.
anxiety, depression, PTSD, even suicidal thoughts.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah,
These groups can really shatter lives.
they absolutely can. And
Yeah.
the damage extends beyond just the individual.
Right.
It impacts families and communities.
Sure.
Relationships are strained or broken.
Yeah.
Trust is shattered. And the sense of betrayal can linger for years.
It's a ripple effect,
Yeah.
causing harm far beyond just that initial circle of those directly involved.
Precisely. And it underscores the importance of raising awareness
Yeah.
and offering support to those who have been affected by harmful groups.
Of course.
We need a culture where people feel safe to speak out
Yeah.
and can access the help they need to heal and rebuild.
I couldn't agree more. It's about fostering compassion and understanding,
Right.
recognizing that anyone can be vulnerable to these tactics.
Absolutely.
Now, you mentioned earlier that Sif was involved in politics at one point.
Yes, they were.
Can you tell us more about that? How
Yeah.
did that play out?
So this is where things take an even more fascinating turn.
Okay.
Back in the 1970s,
Yeah.
Butler's followers started a political party
Wow.
called the Independence for Godly Government.
They went all in. What were they hoping to achieve with this party?
Well, they presented themselves as this multi-faith conservative coalition
Okay.
of reformers,
Gotcha.
and they even ran candidates for the House of Representatives and the mayor's office.
So they had some serious political ambitions.
They did.
Did they have any success?
Well, that's the interesting part.
Okay.
Despite their ambitions, the candidates never disclosed their ties to Butler or Sif. They explicitly claimed to have no affiliation with any religious organization,
Wow.
including the Hare Krishnas.
So they were intentionally hiding their true agenda.
Yeah, it seems that way.
Why do you think they chose that approach?
Well, it's possible they feared alienating voters
Right.
who might be wary of a religious group's influence in politics.
It's a common tactic for groups trying to gain power
Yeah.
without attracting too much scrutiny.
Right.
Did they face any backlash when those ties to Sif were eventually revealed?
There was some controversy, but it's unclear how much it actually impacted their political success.
Gotcha.
But it's a fascinating peek into how these groups can operate in the shadows, using seemingly innocuous fronts to further their aims.
Okay, so SIF had this brief foray into politics in the 1970s.
Yeah.
Is there any evidence of political involvement in more recent years?
That's a question that's been the subject of a lot of debate and speculation.
Yep.
While they haven't been as overtly political as in the 70s, there have been allegations of continued behind-the-scenes influence.
Interesting. What kind of activities are we talking about?
Well, critics have pointed out that a number of politicians, particularly in Hawaii, have been associated with SIF or have received campaign contributions from individuals connected to the group.
Right. So perhaps shifting from running their own candidates to trying to influence existing politicians.
It's certainly a possibility.
Yeah.
And while it's difficult to prove a direct link between SIF and any specific political decisions, the allegations have raised concerns about undue influence. And fueled calls for greater transparency in campaign financing.
Yeah, it's another example of those blurred lines between religion and politics. And highlights the importance of critical thinking and staying informed about potential hidden agendas.
I agree. And it reinforces this idea that harmful groups can operate in very subtle and insidious ways, utilizing seemingly legitimate avenues to advance their goals.
So it's not always about overt displays of power. It's about recognizing those subtler ways that influence can be exerted. Now, before we move on, I want to circle back to something that was mentioned in the source material. Apparently, Chris Butler eventually took a step back from SIF leadership. And his wife, Wailana, assumed a more prominent role.
She did.
Can you tell us more about that transition and its significance?
So this transition marks a really fascinating shift in SIF's story.
Okay.
While Butler remained kind of the spiritual figurehead, Wailana became the public face, especially through her yoga videos and TV shows.
So she brought a different energy to the organization.
Exactly. Wailana emphasized the physical and health benefits of yoga, downplaying the religious or spiritual aspects that were really central to Butler's teachings.
That makes sense. It seems like a strategic move to broaden their appeal and reach a wider audience.
Exactly.
Did this change how the public perceived SIF? Did it soften their image or deflect some of the criticism that was aimed at Butler?
It's hard to say for sure. But Wailana's popularity undoubtedly boosted SIF's profile and introduced their style of yoga globally. And her focus on health and well-being might have made the organization seem less controversial to some.
Because yoga has gone so mainstream. It's seen as beneficial and healthy, not tied to any specific religion.
Exactly.
So emphasizing those physical aspects could have helped SIF distance itself from the more contentious parts of Butler's teachings.
That's a good point. And it reminds us that these groups can be incredibly adaptable, changing their strategies and messaging to fit the times and appeal to different audiences.
Okay, this has been incredibly insightful.
Good.
We've explored SIF's history, its teachings, the allegations against them, their political involvement. And even the role of charisma and community. I'm feeling much more aware of the complexities of harmful groups.
Good.
And the importance of critical thinking.
That's fantastic to hear. And remember, it's not about being paranoid or distrustful of everyone. It's about having healthy skepticism. Doing your research and trusting your intuition. We can be open to new ideas and communities without sacrificing critical thinking or personal autonomy.
Couldn't agree more. Now, before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, I want to take a moment to acknowledge that this conversation might have been difficult for some listeners. If you've been affected by these topics, you are not alone. There are resources to help you process your experiences and find healing and support.
That's so important to remember. And if you're feeling overwhelmed or triggered, please reach out to a trusted friend, family member, therapist, or a cult awareness organization. There is help available, and you don't have to go through this alone.
Okay, so in the final part of our deep dive, we're going to shift our focus from SIF to the broader landscape of harmful groups. We'll explore how to recognize and avoid them, and discuss some practical tips for staying safe.
Right.
And protecting yourself from manipulation and exploitation.
Good.
It's all about equipping ourselves with knowledge.
Yes.
And building those critical thinking skills.
Absolutely.
We need to navigate these complex social situations.
Right.
All right, so we're back and ready to wrap up our deep dive into harmful groups and cults. We spent a lot of time with Sif, really getting into the weeds there.
Yeah.
But now I want to step back and get your expert take on the bigger picture.
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in the specifics of one organization.
Right.
The real goal here is to apply these lessons more broadly, to be able to recognize those patterns and protect ourselves in any situation.
It's like building a radar system
Right.
for harmful groups, no matter what form they take.
Absolutely.
So based on everything we've discussed, what are some of the most universal red flags
Okay.
that should make someone pause and really examine a group or leader?
Let's distill it down to a few key points that anyone can remember.
Okay.
First, watch for signs of excessive control.
Okay.
Does the group isolate its members from outside influences?
Right.
Do they dictate personal choices?
Right.
Like relationships, jobs, or even how you dress?
It's like they want to micromanage your entire life.
Exactly. Second, pay attention to how the group handles information.
Okay.
Is there a culture of secrecy?
Right.
Are dissenting views silenced or punished?
Yeah.
Is there pressure to only get your information from approved sources?
It's like they're building an echo chamber
Yeah.
where you can only hear their version of reality.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Third, be wary of any group that demands absolute obedience or loyalty to the leader.
Right.
Healthy organizations encourage questioning and respectful debate.
Yeah.
They value diverse perspectives.
It's about finding that balance.
Yeah.
You know, respect for authority is one thing, but blind faith is something else entirely.
Well said.
And finally, be very skeptical of groups that make grand promises
Right.
or offer quick fixes to complex problems.
Yes.
You know, real growth, whether personal or spiritual, takes time
Yeah.
and effort and a willingness to face challenges.
It's that old saying.
Yeah.
If it seems too good to be true,
Yeah.
it probably is.
So we've got our red flags: control, information manipulation, blind obedience, and unrealistic promises.
Right.
But let's say someone realizes they're in a situation that's raising these red flags.
Okay.
What advice would you give them? What steps can they take to get out safely?
That's such a crucial question.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember that leaving a harmful group can be incredibly difficult and even dangerous. First and foremost, if you feel physically threatened in any way,
Right.
prioritize your safety above all else.
Of course.
Contact law enforcement or a domestic violence hotline immediately.
Safety first, always.
Absolutely. Then start reaching out to trusted people outside the group.
Okay.
This could be family, friends, a therapist, or a cult awareness organization.
Right.
Breaking that isolation
Yeah.
that these groups create
Right.
is essential.
It's like you need that lifeline back to reality.
Exactly.
For people who can see the situation clearly and offer support without judgment.
You're exactly right.
Yeah.
And be prepared for pushback from the group.
Sure.
They might try to guilt you, shame you, or even threaten you to prevent you from leaving.
It's a lot like breaking free from a toxic relationship.
It is a good comparison.
Yeah.
And just like with ending a toxic relationship, it's so important to have that support system in place.
Right.
And to focus on your own well-being.
So surround yourself with people who believe in you and want the best for you.
Exactly. And don't be afraid to seek professional help.
Right.
Therapists who specialize in cult recovery can provide invaluable guidance and support as you navigate this challenging process.
Okay, so we talked about safety, reaching out for support, and being prepared for resistance.
Right.
Any other advice for someone going through this?
Yes. Be patient with yourself.
Okay.
Leaving a harmful group is a process.
Right.
Often long and complex.
Yeah.
And there might be setbacks along the way.
Sure.
It's okay to take your time.
Yeah.
And to seek professional help
Right.
as you heal and rebuild your life.
Asking for help is not a sign of weakness.
Absolutely not.
In fact, it takes immense strength and courage
It does.
to break free from a system designed to control you.
You got that right. It's a testament to your resilience and your commitment to your own well-being.
We've covered a lot of heavy material today, but I don't want our listeners to come away feeling fearful or paranoid.
Right.
What's the most empowering takeaway you want them to hold on to?
That's a great question. And for me, it all comes back to that idea of trusting your gut.
Yeah.
We all have this inner compass, a
Yeah.
sense of what's right and what's wrong,
Right.
what feels healthy and what feels off.
Yeah.
And harmful groups try to override that inner voice.
Yeah.
But it's always there. We just have to listen.
Trusting yourself is the ultimate form of protection.
Exactly. It's about cultivating that discernment, that awareness of your own inner wisdom.
And it's about seeking out communities that nurture our individuality, respect our boundaries, and encourage us to think for ourselves.
The world is full of wonderful, supportive, and inspiring communities.
Yeah.
And those are the ones worth investing our time and energy in.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation. We've covered so much ground today.
We have.
From the specifics of SIF to broader patterns of harmful groups.
Yeah.
I'm walking away with a much deeper understanding of these dynamics and the importance of staying informed and vigilant.
That's wonderful to hear. Remember, knowledge is power.
Yeah.
And the more we understand these tactics, the better equipped we are to protect ourselves and others.
Exactly. So to our listeners, keep questioning, keep exploring, and most importantly, keep trusting yourselves. Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.